Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all members of the Radley community and to all our school partners who've managed to join us today on Zoom. My name is Caroline Monaghan and I'm responsible for the Beyond Radley Career Speaker Programme, a series of talks designed to give you a live insight into the world of work. I'm pleased to be able to say that this talk was specifically requested by a Radley boy a couple of weeks ago. On the back of his email, I looked through our network on LinkedIn and was able to find our speaker today, Jim Elliott, who's going to talk about a career in music production. We've got over 2,500 connections on LinkedIn and over 1,500 on our own networking platform, Radley Connect. So there are many, many more people we can approach to talk about the types of careers that you might be interested in. Now, before we begin, a quick reminder of a few things. Please keep your microphones on mute. If you want to ask a question, then feel free to do so. Just pop a question onto the chat and there'll be a Q&A session at the end. This is your chance to grill the expert. This event will be recorded so we can share it with those who are unable to attend today. Now I'm going to introduce you to Jim Elliott, a music producer who has written and produced for artists including Foxes, Ellie Goulding, Will Young, Kylie Minogue, Ray Morris and Ollie Murs. Jim knew he wanted to be in music when he was at Radley, but didn't know how to start exploring a career in music production. He's going to talk about the early pathway into music, what it's like working in the industry today, and also tell you why music is one of the most exciting places to be right now. So thank you. Over to you now, Jim.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me on the Zoom call. So I am a record producer and a songwriter, and I would say I've always been in love with music from the word go. I think I would say I was quite obsessed from an early age, playing piano, playing drums, pretty much trying to play any instrument I could. And I sort of started off buying a synthesizer when I was about 13. And at the time, there wasn't a huge amount of music technology, even in well, it was a long time ago. I'm 45 now, so I do the math. That I think I was just obsessed with things that made sounds. From an early speak and spell game I got, and someone showed me that you could actually pull apart the machine and sort of modify the basic sound going A, E, I, O, U to make it sound like a synthesizer. So I was always interested in electronic music instruments from the word go. But I was sort of at schools where really they didn't really know what this was. So I went to a normal prep school, and I was in the orchestras, played percussion, and then I came to Radley, and it was music technology was a very new thing there, and it was predominantly the choir and recital, and occasionally there was a funny room where you could play drums and make noise, but it was kind of hidden away. And there was a great music master there called Mr. Gunningham. I don't know if he's still there, but he wanted to introduce keyboards, synthesizers, drum machines into the music school, which was kind of quite radical at the time. So and because by then I was pretty versed in how to set up a system, me and him talked a lot about how to create this, and obviously I took the keys most of the time for the room and wouldn't let anyone else in. So it was a bit, I guess it was a sort of early stages of maybe Radley working with music technology. It was still very much a sort of fad, if you like, and for a long time it was like a hobby really. And I bumped into a friend who was a bit older than me, and he had left school and he was working for an advertising agency, and he said, "Jim, do you want to come and come to a recording studio?" I was like, well, I've never been to a proper recording studio, and this studio was for recording sounds to adverts. So it was called a sound dubbing studio. So they would get sound effects and place them over picture. So it wasn't really a music recording studio, but it had all the kit, which was very similar. And I was just completely blown away by it. I had no idea that there were these studios built like this and sounding like this, because the sound was incredible. Um, and it sort of perked my interest really to start trying to find out more about the industry, because all that I was exposed to was really NME bands, the pop. As a consumer, I didn't realize there was this whole sort of um, backdrop of jobs and people who worked in the industry. Um, so I started to apply for jobs in the holidays through this newspaper called Loot, which was before the internet, but you could sort of write in a sort of um, a message, and it would come up in the newspaper, and people would ring you up and say, "Hey, I've seen your advert. Do you want to come and work in my studio or collaborate?" So at age 17, I was going off. I lived in London in the holiday. My parents lived in Putney, and I found a sort of part-time job in Brixton in a not a very uh, it was quite a seedy recording studio, but it was a recording studio all the same, and they recorded terrible pop music there. For It was like sort of rip-offs of pop songs that were then karaoke backings. So it was the worst kind of like quality control, but I learned a lot about how to record different types of instruments, and it sort of fed my fascination for this side of the industry. Um, so then, when it came to leaving Radley, I was like, well, I can either pursue a straight career and go to university, um, or I can make the jump and go and try and work in one of these studios. And my parents were a bit like, I think you need to go to university and do the sensible route, then do what you want. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just go along with this. I didn't really have a particular, I want to go to university and study this. It was a bit, it was a bit, um, I'll be honest, I sort of just went along with it, and I took any course that would have me. And I went to Oxford Brookes, and actually it was a great year, but I realized quite quickly during my year at Oxford Brookes that um, I was sort of wasting my time slightly. I wasn't really up for going to all the freshers things. I just wanted to write music and be in a recording studio. And then I met a, 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 a sort of German um, music entrepreneur called Olaf, who was the most brilliant character. And he ran a distribution company that distributed all sorts of records, heavy metal records, techno records, um, sort of subgenres, small genres of music, um, from a place called Wallingford, which was just outside Oxford, and it was an incredible business. He sort of described it onto me on the phone, like he said that all the waifs and strays who make music release through my company. So I was expecting a sort of a shed when he said come and visit me, and instead it was this state of the art building with Porsches outside, and I was sort of okay. Well, this is interesting, and Olaf said, "Do you want to start releasing music through my company, because I like what you're making, and you're you know at home and for a hobby, and I'd like to put it out on a 12-inch record." And I was like, this is incredible. Um, so I then said to my parents, I've got a record deal. I'm leaving university. And And I then sort of thought, well, how much money am I actually going to earn from this? And it was like £300. But it was a little bit of a baptism of fire, because I realized that I needed to jump. I needed to take a risk, if you like. And the reality was that I was going to be poor and penniless for a bit. But everyone I met in the industry um, had sort of followed that route of jumping and following your passion, really. Um, so I did. I mean, I just left Oxford Brookes after a year, um, and found a small job in a studio, um, and I started learning my craft, really. And in London at that time, you could sort of hop around recording studios where you would start off in one studio and then you'd meet someone from another studio, and they would specialize in film music or um, pop music, and you'd sort of cover your bases. And there was a network of these studios. Sadly, a lot of them are closed down, but um, it was a way of sort of gaining experience. And the key thing was meeting people. I realized quite quickly that the music industry it's a vibrant community of creatives who are one foot very creative, and the other they're quite entrepreneurial. So they have to find ways of being paid in areas that are traditionally quite tricky, because it's competitive. Um, so yeah, it's I really found my people. I was lucky, and lots of my friends went to university, got their degree, and came to London, started jobs they hated, and realized that they hadn't found their groove or path, and some of them still haven't. But I was lucky. I realized that I could work in this industry, and I really loved it. Um, so and then I started realizing that at the time I needed to maybe find an area in the music industry that I could support myself, because really working in studios, it was really hard. Like, you were paid nothing. Um, and I realized that one area that I was quite good at writing jingles for adverts, and it was really lucrative if you were lucky. So I set up with a friend of mine a little company that we operated out of a studio in Elephant and Castle. And we created a business around making jingles for advertising, and we did this for about 5 years, and we ended up with a studio in Soho, a sort of quite fancy offices. But it was an extraordinary sort of growth of. Um, we were both pretty much penniless in London. Within 5 years, we created a small company that had a couple of employees, um, and we sort of were in the business of making jingles, and advertising is such that companies at that point had to spend, I think it was maybe 20% of their GDP, which on advertising, because um, it was important, obviously, to um, market their market their products in a way that incorporated things like music, and certain products obviously lended that themselves to that. So um, and also there were campaigns on telly where you'd write for, I don't know, a Lloyd's pharmacy commercial, and the music became part of the brand. So every year they'd ask you to renew it, the contract, and you wouldn't have to do any work. You just say, well, you can use it again for that year. So it was, if you were lucky, it was a fantastic gig to get. Um, so at that time, I was also trying to break into songwriting, into the sort of music industry proper. So I'd always by then I was sort of quite experienced in the studio, and my songwriting was getting better. So I formed I met my partner actually we started a little band. Um, we weren't very good band, but um, we wrote these quite good songs. Um, and the original plan was to try and get signed as a band, and I had my business on the side making advert music, and the band thing was just fun. Um, and we started playing around gigs in London and at venues. Um, and one day someone came up to me and said, "Jim, your band's rubbish, but your songs are really good." So I was a bit hurt by this, and I thought, "Oh, thanks." um, and he said, "Well, have you thought of sending your songs off to people and them, you know, you not singing them or performing them, but someone else taking on the song?" And I sort of didn't realize that this happened so much. I thought, the songs were sort of written by the artists. I didn't quite get that you had professional songwriters. So suddenly I was exposed to a completely new idea of the industry and a different part. Anyway, long and short, uh, one of the songs we had written for our band found its way to Kylie Minogue, um, the record people, the record company, and they rang me up and said, we'd love to use your song. And I thought, great, they're going to sign us as a band, but what they meant was, can Kylie Minogue sing your song? And so I was obviously over the moon, but then I had to break it to my partner and the other people in the band that we weren't going to sing that song anymore. Someone else was going to sing the song. Um, but this was really a kind of breakthrough moment, really. Underneath, this is what I've been waiting for all my professional career, was a breakthrough into the proper music industry. Because in a way, the advertising music, it's fantastic, but it's full of people who maybe wanted to be in a band or write music professionally. And like me, I sort of had this idea that I really wanted to write music for people, but I didn't know how. And now I was presented with an opportunity whereby a sort of superstar, Kylie Minogue, was going to sing my song. So of course I said yes. Come on, This is incredible. Um, and to be fair, I thought, wowie, this is amazing. Everything's going to go crazy. I'm going to become you know, doors are going to open for me. Um, but the song wasn't really that a supersonic hit. It was a minor hit, and doors weren't immediately open for me. So I was a little bit disappointed. Um, but it made me think, okay, well, this is a whole nother area of the industry. Um, let's go for it. This is what I want to do. So I sold my music advertising business and just went for it, writing music for people. And initially, I must have written 400 or 500 songs that, within 2 years of pretty rubbish songs. But I was determined that I this was going to happen. And then our next breakthrough was Kylie Minogue again. Um, so she was on her second album after um, the previous one that we'd had a song on. And we wrote this song called All the Lovers, which is, um, you know, we sent in to the record label saying we think this would be great. And the label rang back, said they hated it, wasn't right. I was like, oh no, I thought that was the one. Um, anyway, strangely, the guy hadn't found the song they were looking for, and again, my song came up, and it got chosen. And this was a much bigger hit. This was this was in America. It was quite big. In Europe, it blew up, and suddenly doors were open for me. So I'd gone from trying my heart out, saying I've had one Kylie Minogue marginal success, to a much bigger record. And this really shifted everything, where I realized that, okay, I've got to keep up with this now. I've got to write the next song. Um, so yeah, and then I had a run of, I don't know, quite a few top 10 hits, a couple of number ones, and became closely. I've worked closely with people like Ellie Goulding and Will Young on a couple of albums, um, and then I just sort of kept growing it from there, um, and here I am now. So that's my career. So I call myself a songwriter producer. So I I can do lots of different things within that field, but essentially I write songs, I produce songs, and I can take a song from a rough idea into making it sound like a finished product and delivering it to the record company. So um, yeah, um, that's my career, um, and things have changed quite a bit in the industry since I joined it. Initially, it was obviously CDs and records and tapes, and now obviously everything is streaming based. So there's been a huge um, change in the industry, and it was looking pretty dodgy at one point, where people were starting to pirate and rip off CDs and upload them on the internet, and um, you know, the industry was losing millions, billions, and then Spotify created this platform whereby for £10 a month or whatever it is now, you had unlimited songs to listen to. And this model has now been repeated by different streaming companies, but it provides, I would say, probably 80% of the revenue for the industry. And it, because people are adopting it, people are incorporating it into the way they consume music. It's just growing every year. So um, it's, the industry has gone from being in not a great position, and people have been going, "Oh, the industry's dead." Now it's looking really good. And Caroline, can I ask you to upload one of the graphs? I have to apologize. I'm not very tacky, but oh, it's the other one. Have you got the other graph?
Just bear with us. What was the first Kylie song that you wrote? Bit of a Kylie fan here.
It was called Two Hearts.
Two Hearts.
And it was the song she came back with after having cancer. So for her, it was an enormous song for her, because she hadn't been performing for ages, and she she wanted to choose something that was a bit off kilter, and yeah, it was incredibly exciting when that happened. But I don't know if you managed to see that graph, everybody, but I can't.
It was there, and then it went.
It came and went. Oh well, if you noticed, there was just a nice curve going upwards, which it's just, we're in a really healthy position right now. And what's really interesting is that previously, the only people who'd taken a risk on investing in musicians have been record companies. So record companies are notoriously, they rip everyone off, and their contracts are pretty appalling most of the time. And because the value of the music industry is going up so much at the moment, you're now getting companies that would never touch the industry are now investing in songwrites, and there are companies like Hypnosis on the stock exchange, which they buy up songwrites with a view that the royalties are there's a constant stream of royalties coming from songs. So in the old days, you used to release a song, and it would spike initially on the release of the record or the CD, and people would buy it, and then the record would be played on the radio, and then you get interest in the song from that, and then gradually, as people maybe own the CD, the revenue would sort of die down from it. And now, because of streaming, you know, if you have a hit song, it just doesn't go away. It just, you might not get an enormous spike like you did before, but you get a continuous stream of revenue, which you know, is significant over a piece of time, over amount of time. So it's very different, and people can, in a way, forecast, say you're going to earn X from this song. If it's been a successful song, you can then start trading in futures of that song. So it's fascinating what's been happening. And if you're a creator of music, then, and you really, you know, you pursue it and you get really good at it, the chances are that you can make at least a stab at a career out of it. Whereas before it was a bit of a mystery. So yeah. So
I don't know if you've seen, but we managed to get albeit a presenter view of the two. Can you see that on your screen? Of the two graphs
yeah.
you wanted to show? Yeah.
Yeah. So we can have a look at that. It looks very healthy, and what also is interesting is the amount of streaming revenue compared to physical revenue. So physical, I mean by things you buy and records and CDs, whereas now streaming makes up a lot of the revenue coming in. So yeah, so it's a healthy position, the industry. You know, what I've talked a bit about what I've done and how I sort of got into the industry, which was pretty haphazard, but it was really driven by just a little bit. Well, I was quite obsessed with what I did, and I did live in London. Now, that I would say, I don't want to say that's very important, but it is a thing that maybe is less so now. We're in a sort of a world of Zoom meetings, and but I think geography does play a little bit of a part in that, because there are definite centers of industries, creative industries. So I would say London and Los Angeles are predominantly the places where pop music, the music business is centered. So I go over to Los Angeles quite a lot to write with people and to do business with people. And so London, New York, Los Angeles are predominantly the centers. So I guess if you want to get into the industry, if you can base yourselves in any of these places, it does help. It is harder doing it from outside. Now, having said that, I don't live in London anymore. I live in Wales, but I do go up to London a hell of a lot. So yeah, I guess we could talk a bit about how the industry is constructed and what aspects to it there are. So there's another graph.
I'll try and share it from my screen this time. I might have a bit more luck. Let's see if that works. Bear with. Where is it? It's going well, the tech today. It's there. Can you see
Okay.
that? It'll do, I think.
Sorry, it's not very big. I don't know if you
No.
can see it, but if you can, peer closely at your screen, and you'll see that these are the predominantly the different areas in the music industry that you can get involved in. So um, at the bottom, there are the musicians,
Just try. For some
which
reason, I can't share that PowerPoint. I don't know why. Let's try one more time.
can you see? Is everyone seeing the graph or not? No.
Oh, there it is. Try this. Did that work?
I can see it.
Yeah. Can you see? Yeah, great. Okay, we're on.
Brilliant. Okay. So if everyone's having a look at the graph or the flow chart, okay, well, let's have a look at the musicians down the bottom. It's interesting that the musicians are down the bottom because this tends to be the case. Even though it is the music industry, musicians tend to be treated with, they're the hard done by guys because essentially, you know, being a musician is in many people's eyes a bit like it's a job, but it it's sort of you're doing what you love, therefore that you get value in that, and you shouldn't be paid as much. Now, so um, if you are a musician, then you have an industry body called the Musicians Union. Now, I'm a member of the Musicians Union, so they look after things like if you play an instrument on a record, then they will check where that record's been played and collect royalties for you. Now, there are within the Musicians Union, there are other collecting bodies. So if you play, let's say you play the piano on a pop song, um, you will have to, and that song is released by Madonna, let's say, and Madonna goes and releases the song in different countries. You as a musician will have to register with different collecting bodies so that you will get paid if the song is played on radio, if it's played on TV, if she performs it on a concert. So it's important if you are a musician to really get advice on how to protect your performances. So I'll just quickly whiz around everything so it just makes more sense. So at the top, you've got the managers who represent artists there, and they will basically, if you're an artist, they will help book you gigs. They will maybe align you with brands. They will help negotiate your contracts, and they're an integral part of the industry because they are a link between the creative and the record companies. If you're a singer or a musician, um, it's quite complex, this flow chart. There's a lot to go through. But I guess I just wanted to show you the idea that the music industry within it has a lot of different jobs. So, for instance, lawyers. Without lawyers, we can't really make any money in the music industry because when you write a piece of music, it becomes an intellectual copyright. That is basically if you write a song on your piano and you record it on your iPhone, there's an actual law that protects that piece of music. It's yours basically. Now, what a lawyer can then do is if you want to sell that song to someone, or you you want to establish a copyright with a record company, a lawyer will help put that into legal wording so that it's no good you just sending in a song and expecting to be paid. You have to engage a lawyer to create a contract. So you can see that as a lawyer in the music industry, there's a huge amount of contract work that comes through, from record companies through musicians. It's a massive industry. So there's obviously the legal aspect of the music industry. There are companies that control song rights, which, as I said, they collect money from other countries, following the songs and finding out if it's being played on the radio or TV, which are again huge industries. There are, as you can see, there's the shops, there's the record shops, there's the radio. Radio is huge for music industry, and I would say, I don't know if that comes under music industry because it's more of a service, um, but it's a quite diverse, and it's growing in more and more interesting in terms of there are new platforms such as TikTok, um, where there's a whole, literally laws are being created about the use of music every day. So you now have, where people use music to make their own dances on TikTok, and you have to establish, well, how does someone get paid from that? Because they're borrowing the music, but they're not really listening to it. They're dancing to it. They're filming themselves. It's such a fast-moving industry at the moment. So yeah, I just wanted to show this flow diagram so you can just see all the different strange and wonderful areas you can work in. And so you don't necessarily have to be a performer. You don't have to write music. If you've got just a passion for, I don't know, creative industries, and you're wondering how do I approach this with maybe my skill set that you have, you can see that it incorporates quite a lot of different skills.
Do you think it's best to sort of move around a little bit and try different things if you can?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I've been predominantly recording studio based in what I do. I've never worked for a record company, or I've never worked for a manager's office. But yeah, I would say that if you're, say, a creative, and I would say probably I would advise against um, working in the industry. We call it working the other side of the fence, because I think you can be quite easily tainted, and the amount of work that needs to go into building a career as a creative is it. I mean, lots of people do that, but I just think it's. I think if you work, almost you can divide the industry into two. One is very creative, and that is to do with writing music, performing music, um, working in studios, that side of things. And then the other side is the money side, which is um, recording companies, management companies, um, collecting bodies. And I would say that it's good to split the two. I think it's tricky going between the two. So yeah, I would say that.
Sorry, I was just going to say, so I wondered, so in terms of competitiveness, you mentioned that the industry is very competitive. Were you talking about the sort of musician side of things there, and your kind of arena, or is it competitive throughout?
It's competitive throughout. I mean, people call it a glamorous industry to work in. It's not, but I think when you say I work in the music industry, I think people do obviously think, "Wowie, that sounds like a really fun." It is a very fun and exciting industry, and therefore people are prepared to work in it for less money so that they can get the jobs, because they just really want to work in the industry. And I think it's you know that it is what it is. It's you have to you really have to want it and be obsessed with what you do. I think they're the people who are, you know, most of the people who've done really well that I know, they're the sort of people who have gone that one step extra. They live it, they breathe it. It's not a particularly um, if you're looking for life balance, it's probably not the best thing. Uh, but it's such I think because it's driven by passion, it's the competitiveness comes with just you wanting to go that bit extra, do that, you know, go for it more than the other person. And I think those are the people that tend to get the jobs.
Well, you mentioned earlier that you went to university and then decided it wasn't for you. Can you do music production or specific music degrees now? I believe you can, can't you? Yeah.
You
So
really can, yeah.
Did they not have that opportunity for you then, or were you not sure that that's what you wanted to do?
I think at that time the if there was a course, it was mostly academic research. It wasn't particularly involved with the music industry. It was more physics and maths. Uh, 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 you know, working with music sounds, more science based, if you like, than actually figuring out how to make a song sound better. Um, and I think now that I mean, there are amazing courses, I think, that uh, you can go to. And I mean, I would say that there is a little bit of a danger with those courses in that they give you a full sense of what, because you're in an institution, you're not in the workplace. And the people who teach at these music production courses tend to be people who are not that, they're not in the industry then. They were maybe in it 5 years ago. So you get a slightly rose-tinted view, or the opposite. You get a very negative view of. And I've heard a lot of people who go to these courses that it, it, it it's an unrealistic view sometimes. I mean, the best, you know, the best advice I can give you is probably to create your own, be entrepreneurial with it, and chase it yourself. And it's incredibly hard because you know, when you're looking at how to get into an industry like this, you're like, well, I can go and do a course, but actually, you're probably better off harassing whoever you want to harass and not taking no for an answer, and knocking down doors and just being really bold with it, and let your sort of passion drive you to, yeah.
Yeah, well, we've got some questions coming through on the chat here. Please, anyone who wants to ask anything of Jim, do pop it on the chat for us.
Can I see? I'm sorry, I'm really stupid with Zoom. Where is the chat screen?
If you go down the bottom, there's a chat bubble.
Yeah,
just hit that and you'll be able to see it, but I'll direct the question. So Nix wants to know, sort of pertaining to what we were just talking about, if you were starting again, do you think you would follow the same path, or would you do something slightly different?
Good question, Nick. I think I'd probably follow the same path, as much as I realized early on that you have to, in order to survive in this industry, you have to be very adaptable. It's like you can't take anything for granted. So in that respect, like when I was starting out, you know, I literally, it was hand to mouth. And I could always go and back stay with my parents. I'm not going to lie, they had a nice house and I still had my room there, but it was not a cool thing to go and do. I had to try and make it by myself. So, and therefore, I was quite glad from early on. I had it a bit tough, and I learned that you just you take every, you sort of take every opportunity, don't? I had to say yes to a lot of things, um, in terms of, you know, and not be. I think there's that very tricky thing for musicians where integrity is everything. So um, you have to strike that balance of saying yes to things, even though you feel maybe it's not quite right for you, but equally you don't know where that yes might lead you to. So um, yeah, so I think I would sort of do it. Yeah, I'd do it my way. I mean, I made some terrible mistakes along the way. I've sort of worked with wrong people, and you know everyone does that. But I think that approach, yeah, I think I'd do it the same way.
Well, that's good. It's good that you can say that. Some questions coming in thick and fast now. What sort of projects are you working on now?
So I'm working with an artist called James Morrison, who is he's like a lovely soul singer. He sounds very like Stevie Wonder. So he's quite a. So I'm 45 now, and you know I'm an old timer in the music industry. You know, my peers and people I work with are often much younger than me. So I write music for Radio 2 now predominantly. I occasionally have Radio 1 hits, but essentially you just have to be honest with yourself, like to write for your demographic, for your age group. Um, so I work a lot with artists who feature on Radio 2, and it's kind of nice because I love writing songs as opposed to beats and you know, and I'm just rubbish at that style of music. Anything beyond a good song, I you know. So with James Morrison, I'm working with Ellie Goulding again on some new material, and we've all been talking. There's Will Young. I'm working with a new artist called Berg, who's from Sweden. Um, yeah, to say lots and lots of different things, but that's the thing with when you're a songwriter, you literally do jump around different songs and different people. Okay, should I just go through some of these questions?
Yeah, feel free. I was just going to ask you because there's a question from Rafe about your involvement on Ollie Murs' Heart Skips a Beat.
Heart Skips a Beat. So I was a songwriter on that song, and I got together with a couple of guys who I sometimes work with. So sometimes in the songwriting world, you have these. They're called camps, which is quite an interesting term. But essentially, songwriters get together en masse, and you sort of brainstorm songs for a particular artist. And I got together with a couple of guys, and we had JLS in one part of the building, and then Ollie Murs was in the other. And JLS and Ollie Murs would hop around these different studios, and I'd be in one studio, and then another guy would be in another. And so one day we had Ollie Murs in our studio, and yeah, we came up with the idea of Heart Skips a Beat before he got there, and then he came in, and then he sang it and went away, and yeah. So I was a songwriter on that, and I think I played the piano on that song as well. So
brilliant. Yeah. We've got a question here from Nick. How do record companies sort of start off in the first place?
How do they start? I think I guess it's often someone who wants to release music that they love, and that's normally it's done from a sort of passion project or obsession with, say, like around where I live, there's a massive, well not so massive, but there's about 4 or 5 bands who are really into psychedelic rock, so kind of very strange 70s drone music with drums and guitars and hardly any vocals. It's pretty out there, but I really love it, and there isn't really. I mean, there are small niche labels that release the music, but so I've got together with a friend of mine, and we're going to put out some of these um, acts, and we're going to record them. Um, I don't know how at the moment, but we're going to find a way of recording these local bands and then just issuing them straight to vinyl. So, and it's purely limited to like 250 um, copies. But there's an example of how a label would start, and then perhaps maybe one of those acts would start doing well, and then suddenly you'd have to raise money to press up 1,000 copies or whatever of vinyl, or if you're on Spotify, you'd spend the money on marketing, and you grow it from there. But essentially, a lot of these companies are starting, especially independent labels. But yeah, I hope that answers that one.
That's great, thank you. Question here from Molly. Why do you think so many artists are unhappy with streaming services like Spotify? And do you think websites like Bandcamp will ever be able to compete with streaming platforms?
Yeah, I mean, so at the moment, the problem with streaming is that, I mean, I say it's really helping out the industry. It is pretty unfair on the song creators. So the record companies did a deal really early on with Spotify, whereby Spotify could license all their catalog. So Universal Music, Sony Music, um, Warner Music, they own the lion's share of the recording copyrights of these songs. And so Spotify said, look, we'll give you loads of money in the deal. We'll give less money to the songwriters. So I don't know if I explain this, but with money that comes in from, say, a sale of a CD or a stream, the money is split into two. So the person who paid for the recording of the song gets a chunk of money, and then the actual person who wrote the song gets a chunk of the money. And at the moment, the streaming industry is weighted towards the recorded side. So that is record companies, and the songwriters, i.e. the artists, the musicians, get a small percentage. But recently in America, which is really good news, the American Copyright Federation, I can't remember the name of it, they've ruled that it's unfair, and it needs to be more of a 50-50 split. So when that happens, I think musicians won't be so unhappy, but it will happen because it's been passed by Congress, and it's coming. So it's just a question of when.
Okay. And did you know about Bandcamp?
Yeah, so Bandcamp's a really interesting idea. So rather than you as an artist having to almost perform their music, record it, and then wait for the royalty to come in, what you can do is, if you have, say, 1,000 fans, you can say, hey, 1,000 fans, I want to create my next album. Will you advance pay me £10 so I can go and record the music, and you'll in return get the album? And it's a way of advancing the money. So I don't know. It's a different model, I think, because essentially you're creating a product that becomes, you're asking people to pay for that product. Um, I think in some ways that it's a brilliant model if you've got a small amount of fans. Say you're if you've got 500 to 1,000, 3,000 fans, and you can ask your fans for, say, £5 to make, that's quite a good amount of money to front the recording of a new album, and it can sort of, it's a, and that can go into funding your touring, or so it's a really good model for that. But I think because of the nature of it, it's it's a different thing, really. I don't think it will compete because it's just completely different. Is there such a thing as a white list? I'm just going on to the next question. So
Yeah,
is there such thing as...
we'll if you perhaps finish up with the last one, because we'll close up from there. Have you got any tips on contracts and what type of contracts there are out there? What types?
Oh wow, that's quite a big question. I mean, yes, what's great is that there are resources online to have a look at examples of record contracts. I would say that any contract, I know it's expensive, but I would not sign anything without getting legal advice. It's such a minefield if you get it wrong, and it's not worth. I made some really bad mistakes by thinking I knew legal terminology. And so if you are in a position where someone approaches you and wants to release something, then it's worth spending 200 quid on a lawyer to, I mean, if you can get a lawyer that cheap, but often if you've got no money, and the lawyers will do things, they might even do it for free in the hope that when you're up and running, you'll come back to them. But yeah, I would always go to a lawyer, unless you're a lawyer yourself. But, yeah.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you so much, Jim. That was really
That's
enjoyable, useful, invaluable insight into the
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. Good luck.
Well, before we all go, I'm going to tell you about the final talk we've got lined up before a well-earned half-term break. On Wednesday, we've got Max Rendell, professional magician, who will talk about his life as a magician and how the skills he's learned performing magic have enabled him to branch out into the business world. Max will not be able to resist demonstrating his magical powers during this talk, so it's definitely one to watch. And just a final reminder that you can watch any talks that you may have missed on Radley Video. Thank you for attending, and we hope to see you on Wednesday. And thanks so much to you, Jim. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.